Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Empowering Entrepreneurs Podcast. I'm Glenn Harper.
Julie Smith.
What's going on, Julie?
We were just talking about accents.
That's right. Well, I have a Ohio. I can't really do much with that accent.
Ohio, right?
That's middle Ohio. Used to be northern. It's a little different. Got coffee today. Glasses on. You liking the weather?
It's raining. No, I said it's
miserable.
ugh.
Trick or treat.
We're on the bell curve down for weather.
Down. It's not good. Well, we've got a really treat today. We got Tom Schwab here, founder and chief evangelist of Interview Valet. Even though this sounds like he's a traditional preacher, one needs only to chat with him to know that he is an evangelical for another type of belief. He is the brains behind Interview Valet, whereas they specialize in helping podcasters market their show content to their targeted customers / audience. This, of course, means more views, which means more exposure, which means more ad revenue. Everybody wins. Tom hails from what we call in Ohio call the state up north, the dreaded state of Michigan. We, of course, say that in jest as Michigan is a beautiful state and their schools are top notch. Tom seems to be confused on what he wanted to be when he grew up, but in spite of his first love of marketing and the military, he did decide to do something easier than marketing, mechanical engineering at West Point. What the hell? In Tom's spare time, he challenges random people who irritate him to boxing matches. This makes someone's butt legal. Genius. This is going to be fun getting to know Tom, so sit back and enjoy. Thanks, Tom, for being on our show.
Well, I've got the Chicago accent. I'm not AI because I dropped the G on all words that end in ing, and I'm thrilled to be here and just having an exciting conversation.
Well, that's what it's all about. Well, I'd like to stalk my guests a little bit, and you have a lot of good stuff out there, but it's a vacuum for other things. I'm not sure what's going on, but it says you grew up in Kalamazoo, Michigan, in the shadow of the old Gibson, now Heritage Guitar Factory, and it said that you used to play guitar with Jimmy Page and Angus Young. Is that true?
I was going to say, if the internet says it's true, it must be true.
It has to be.
I was going to say I didn't move to Kalamazoo until I got out of the service, but I still go to the bar that's right next to the old Gibson Guitar Factory. It moved down to Nashville in the 70s, but there's a great bar called Louis, so it's got pictures of all those people when they came to pick up the guitar.
Isn't that crazy? In Kalamazoo is the epicenter of the incredible musicians that play that guitar. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Who knew? So you hail from Chicago, you said.
Well, the suburbs of Chicago, right? I say Chicago, and then I'll say, well, where in Chicago? And I'll say the Fox Valley, and they're like, well, that's more like Iowa, right? It's 38 miles outside the city. But being in the service gave me a chance to see the world, different viewpoints. And you said I was confused of what I wanted to be when I grew up. I don't know if I want to ever grow up. It's this idea of it's an evolution, right? Everything I've done only makes sense as an entrepreneur in the rearview mirror, right? I always say the biggest piece of fiction I've ever read or written was that game plan or the business plan, right? Everything was up and to the right. And then you get out there in the real world and you figure out what the clients want. And it's always an evolution of what your idea was. So I'm always excited about what the next evolution is in the world.
I couldn't agree more. So, when you grew up in this little town, what's it called? Fox what?
Well, the city is called St. Charles. It's in the Fox Valley.
St. Charles. Did you, when you were a kid there growing up, you got your parents, were they entrepreneurs? Did they work real jobs? How did that go down?
My grandfather was, so he was a business owner, and he was probably the biggest impact on my life. And my dad, God love him, we had a great family, great life, but he was a loyal employee. And I'll never forget when I left the service and he told me that I was a fool, right? How can you leave the service, right? All you got to do is put in another 15 years and you'll get the retirement. And I'm like, Dad, it's just not for me. Then when I went straight commission, he called me a dang fool or something else like that, right? He's like, you can't do this, right? You've got a house, you've got a family, you can't make these big bets. And I'm like, I believe I can. And, he lived long enough to say that he was wrong. And I guess I was always an entrepreneur born into a non-entrepreneurial family, but had enough influences in my life that showed me a different way. And is it the right way? Is it the wrong way? I don't know, but it's my way, and I've enjoyed the ride.
I'm curious. Do you have any siblings?
I do. Three siblings, and none of them became entrepreneurs.
Okay.
So you ought to wonder, was mom and dad trying to do a reverse psychology on you and say, you can't do that? And then you say, oh, yeah, watch me. Or were they,
Wait, are you the oldest?
I'm the second oldest. And I think it wasn't so much my parents as it was the people that I ran into in life. Right. I caddied at the country club. Right. And that gave me a great experience of saying, how come these guys get to golf on a Wednesday when everybody else is working on a Wednesday? Or I worked at a liquor store, stocking shelves, and the owners were two young entrepreneurs, and learned so much from them. Still friends with them to this day. And I think there was enough examples of different ideas, different ways to go. And I think at times we just go with the normal way, right? When your parents are doctors, it's normal for you to be a doctor or a lawyer or whatever. But I think it's important to just look at what other influences you have in your life and examples and say, this is the one that looks most appealing to me.
When you were working at the liquor store, how old were you?
I started when I was 15. And I was having fun just stocking shelves. And then I'll never forget when I turned 16 and I got told the good news and the bad news. Good news is I'm going on payroll. The bad news is my take home was less.
Isn't that terrible? Were you a sampler of the merchandise at all because you had the keys to the kingdom? Just out of curiosity. It's one of those things as a kid, you're like the dream come true, right?
You would think so. But I was just talking to my boss, Bob Lundeen from Lundeen's Liquor World, probably about a year ago. And I'm like, I never drank there. I never stole product, anything like that, because they were so good to me and I was so loyal to them, right? I wouldn't want to get them in trouble. I was more like standing in the aisle behind the cash register, shaking my head. No, don't sell to this person. And then they'd come up and say, but the ID looked good. And I'm like, yeah, I go to school with her. It was probably her older sister's ID, something like that. So it's one of those things where had the opportunity, but they treated me so well, right, that I had the loyalty to them.
But I think it's different that because again, there are, I felt like I was kind of that way growing up working as a young, really young. I just always felt like it was like my company and I wouldn't do that to me. So why would I do it to them? But I just think it's got to be something the way you were raised. It has to be some values are instilled with you, but it was just a different lens because most of my people I hung out with and friends, they'd exploit wherever they worked. I mean, it was crazy.
And there's a term that I remember at Stryker they used, psychologically self-employed. And that's something that I look for in our team. And, people will say, well, I don't like managing people. Well, if you need to be managed, you should not work for me because I love leading people, but if I've got to manage you and micromanage you, this is not the place for you. So I'm always looking for those people that are psychologically self-employed. I think of when I promoted my operations manager, Jessica Morgan. She is awesome, right? And she took over operations and she started going through the P&L and all the rest of that. And she's like, what is this monthly recurring $15 charge for? And I'd be like, shoot, it's one I've been meaning to cancel, but I just get busy with it. Right. And she's like, she went through and she cleaned up all of those. She cared more about my money than I did.
And that's the challenge, I don't want to skip ahead to these entrepreneur things because I want to see, again, trying to paint the picture of your journey and how you got where you got and then how do we implement it. But it's amazing how people don't look at it that way. Most people, it's hard to find a employee or a colleague that wants to look at it through that lens where they care and it's bigger than them. They always want to look at what it's for them. It's crazy.
Yeah. And I think of my friends that worked at McDonald's or Burger King, right? They would always pass us out, 4 extra bags of food when we came along, right? Mm-hmm. And they didn't know their boss. It was a corporation. For me, I knew Bob and Dave's family, and they gave me perks like I get at no other job. So here's an example. Dave drove a Camaro. And every time there was a dance in high school or something like that, we used to switch cars. And I'd have to clean up his Camaro, take the car seat out of the back, pick up all the Cheerios and stuff like that. And I would detail that car great so I could take it for one of the dances. And he'd drive around town in a, what was a 69 Plymouth Fury. And it's one of those things, it's like, that was just one of those little perks that he offered me. And that's something that I try thinking of now. It's like, would I stay there because he gave me a 15-cent raise? No, but I'd never leave because of it was almost like family.
But that's to that point, your father, your grandfather, somebody had to instill in you that when you borrow something from somebody, you always give it back to them better than they gave it to you. So you had it clean, full tank of gas, clean, ready to go. And he's like, wow, this is the cheapest car wash I ever got, probably. But most people don't do that. They don't understand that rule. If you borrow something, give it back better than the way you received it.
Yeah, and even that reciprocity, right? If somebody does something nice for you, do something nice for them, and it becomes this upward spiral as opposed to taking advantage of somebody and doing a downward spiral, right? And same thing in business, right? If you do the minimum required, they'll send you the minimum referrals and profits, right? But if you take that extra step, then they want to do something nice for you, and it's a great place to be.
So you're growing up here, you're working in a liquor store, driving Camaros. Sounds like a awesome high school years. And then at some point you're like, well, I feel like I got to go. Did you play sports? Did you box in high school, or did you have that sport, or no, you didn't even pick that up till later?
I was a cross country runner. So I ran track, cross country, and then working at the liquor store, there was one of the gentlemen that walked in, and he had worked for them a number of years before. I didn't know him before then. And this guy had just been around the world, and he came in to talk to Bob and Dave, and he went to the military academies. And I just thought, what is this? And Bob explained to me that, there's service academies, and you can go there. They pay for your education. You get to go, all the rest of this. And at this time, I was looking at college, and I'll never forget Northwestern I looked at. And at that time, Northwestern, with tuition and room and board and everything, was $10,000 a year. And I'm thinking, I'll never make $40,000 in a year to pay back that degree, right? That was so much money to me.
Mhm.
And then I'm like, the academies, that sounds really interesting. So I started to go down that route. And by the grace of God and a clerical error, I got in there. I was born without depth perception. So I wasn't medically qualified, but they didn't catch that on my records until my senior year. And by that time, they gave me a waiver on it.
How crazy is that? So you went to the Naval Academy first, and then you went to Western Michigan after that, or how'd that go?
So I went to the Naval Academy, graduated from there as a mechanical engineer, ran nuclear power plants on an aircraft carrier. And then when I got out after 5 years, I was interviewing for different companies. And one of the companies that I was interviewing with, I wanted to take the job in San Jose, and great company. And then I realized by that time I'm married. I've got 2 kids. I couldn't afford to live in San Jose. And so they said, well, we've got another facility in Kalamazoo, Michigan, right? In fact, that's where Stryker Corporation is based out of. So I'm like, sure, let's look at it. So on a snowy February day, I said, I'll take the job, but I'm not dying here. And it's become home. It's a great place to live, raised a family, but that's what got me back to the Midwest.
I got to go back to this. You're in high school. You're working in a liquor store, caddying. You go to Naval Academy, and you're dealing with nuclear subs. Like, how does that? That's a massive jump. How did you decide to do that? I mean, that's you got to be pretty smart to do that.
It makes sense in the rearview mirror, but in a period of, what was that, 6 years, my life changed dramatically. So when I was growing up, I'd never really been more than 100 miles from my home, right? And then a year after joining the service, I've been around the world, been to Australia, seen so many things, met so many different people. And I think it's always this idea of what's next? What's that curious thing? Once I graduated, it's like, oh, yeah, um, I'm an engineer. Let's do nuclear power. That sounds great. And so I've always looked at it's like, what has this foundation set me up for the next one? And that's why I say life is an evolution, not a revolution. And I look back and there's some people that I know that sold medical devices at the same time I did. And they'll say, oh, well, now I've got, 25 years of experience. And that would kill me today, right? It's like I want to get 1 year experience, maybe 2 years experience, and then use that to build on to the next thing. And it's this idea that I think I get bored easily, so I'm always looking for that next challenge. So especially in today, right there, you can always build on to the next thing.
So this is the question we always have. This question with, I guess, like, is this something that one is born with, or is this something that the environment you grew up in dictates that you have to look at things through a lens because you want to get out of something and be something, right?
Yeah.
It's impossible. I think most of the time you're born with it, and you just either you have it or you don't. And if you have it, do you act on it? And you, like yourself, you definitely acted on it. Some people are kind of scared and they get a real job first and they go do it. And then the people that aren't born with it, they never take the chance. So what do you think it is?
Man, that's interesting. I think some of it could be environment, right? Your peer group, if your peer group is doing it, you'll do it, right? All my peer group was caddying, so it seemed like the normal thing to do. And to put yourself in that peer group. The other thing is the necessity, right? Of I wasn't getting an allowance. If I wanted money to go on dates or anything like that, I had to earn it. So there's that necessity. And Christopher Lochhead from Category Pirates was the one that taught me this. He said there's big E entrepreneurship and little e entrepreneurship. And he views big E as like Mark Zuckerberg, venture capital funded, right? They're making big bets that with other people's money. And then he says there's little e entrepreneurs that are making big bets with their own money, right? And this idea that they're not just trying to make Wall Street rich, they're trying to change their life. They're trying to change their employees' lives. And so I think some of that could be environment, right? Where it's like, I know what I want out of life, and I'm just seeing a job is not going to get me there. I'll work really, really hard, but I want to have more control in my life. And I don't think there's a wrong way, right? The world needs people that sign the front of the check and the back of the check. But I think once you have done one for too long, it's hard to do the other, right? I always say I'm unemployable right now.
You'll never go work for somebody. It's impossible.
Right. And I think the flip side too, once you have been an employee for so long, it can be really, really tough too. It's almost like we refer to it as being institutionalized, right? In Shawshank Redemption, where they have such a hard time after they've been in the institution. And I've seen this with friends that have gotten out of the service for 20 or 30 years. It's really hard after you've been institutionalized like that.
So you said your grandpa had an effect on you. Where do you think that impact happened? Do you think it was in your youth that maybe helped get you to where you are today? Or do you think it was an epiphany later in life about maybe how he lived or what he did or what he said? Just curious.
Yeah. Thanks for asking that. It makes me think through this. And I think it was his example. And so Cunningham Service Station was like the big auto station in St. Charles. And he knew everybody. And everybody knew him. They trusted him. He was like the little celebrity there. And I loved that because the richness of his life was the richness of his relationships, right? We could go out to a restaurant and he'd either be going over to their table and taking me along, or they'd be coming over to his table, right? And so it was just a very rich life that he was having fun with. And in some ways, I still look back on this because people will ask, what's the best business advice you've ever gotten? And I don't know the answer to this one, but I do know the worst business advice I've ever gotten. And that came from my grandfather. Before I went to the academy, we were sitting down having a beer, right? He thought it was my first one, but he said, choose carefully who you drink with because you can't choose who you work with. And I understood what he meant by that, right? But that was his world, not my world now. And, if you weren't within 10 miles of St. Charles, you'd never be a customer of his. And he had to take all customers. I got to the point in my life where it's like, no, that rule doesn't apply anymore, right? And so I always think of him that he had to take all customers, and today we don't, right? We can be choosy. And I think if I wouldn't want to drink with you, if I don't want you around my family, I certainly don't want you around my business. And other times I'll think of him of, he wouldn't understand the internet, but he'd understand how to grow businesses, right? So from the standpoint of, podcast interview marketing, he had no idea what the internet is, what podcasts are, all the rest of that. But if I explained it to him that, well, you can go on and talk to other people's audiences, get that know, like, and trust, and you don't have to leave home. And he's like, oh, same thing I did when I joined the country club or spoke at the Rotary Club. I'm like, exactly. That makes sense to him. So a lot of times I think of, would my grandfather understand the strategy that I'm doing? Because I think he was a great business person. And while he wouldn't understand the tactics, man, he would understand the strategy.
I've only listened to you for 20 minutes, but I think if I could wrap that into a red bow, I think he taught you the impact on relationships.
Yes.
And I think that's probably what resonated with you as a young and still does to this day.
I would agree with you on that. It's that relationships are the ultimate currency, right? Nothing can take them away. Inflation doesn't touch them. Heck, those relationships even last beyond death, right? There's people that will still, my grandfather was gone for 10 years and people would still see me and say, hey, you're Jim Cunningham's son or grandson, right? I'm like, yeah. How's your grandpa doing? He passed away about 10 years ago. Oh, he was a great man, right? And they would do anything for me because of who my grandfather was to them.
It's funny, as a golfer myself, I love having a caddy. It's so much fun, right? They can you have a good rapport with them. They make you feel like you can make the shot. They take care of all the details. They understand how you're going to swing after the first 2 balls you hit. They know what's going on, right? And it's valuable when you have a good caddy, a good relationship, you end up usually shooting pretty well. If you have a caddy that doesn't have a relationship with you, you're going to immediately blame them, right? It's in life. And then you, as in the liquor store, you're everybody's best friend because you're selling them what they want. Like, what a great job that is, right? And then here you are, you're going on to the military, and here where you're responsible so the ship doesn't blow up. I mean, that's pretty good.
The irony and the worst advice you believe you got, and then the fact that you worked in the liquor store. The full circle of that,
Yes.
right? And
Yeah.
That's the best. So here you are, you're working at a real job and you're like, this is cool. This is all right. And you're like, I'm just really not doing what I want to do. What was the factor that said, wait a minute, I have this idea. I have this other thing I want to do where I want to hang up my shingle and do my thing. What was the impetus for that aha moment to go, I need to do something different?
And once again, sometimes people will say, oh, I had this great idea, this great plan. I think God, the world, whatever, just kept hitting me upside the head and saying, hey, stupid, this is the next step, right? So I went from working inside at Stryker to being a sales rep to having my own distributorship. And I thought, I've got my own business here. Well, I had one supplier and was really just sort of the middleman there. And when they decided in 2008 to cut out the middleman, it made sense to them, right? But I had this sideline business. And if you ever see people walking around with the little knee scooters after they've broken their ankle or those weren't available. So we were like renting them out locally, and people were telling other people about it. And I had read a book called Inbound Marketing by Dharmesh Saw and Brian Halligan. They went on to form HubSpot. And I listened to that, read the book, and then reached out to them and said, hey, has anybody ever tried this for e-commerce? And they're like, no, but it should work. I'm like, yeah, I think so too. So I was HubSpot's first e-commerce case study. We built that business up from a regional player to a national leader, sold the business off. And then when I was in my sabbatical time, I had people that said, well, how'd you grow your business? And I said, well, guest blogs, but they don't work anymore, right? By 2014, guest blogs were pretty passe. And so at that time, I thought, oh, I bet you could use podcast interviews the same way. So we tested that. It worked. And had our beta testers were the ones that said, hey, you should launch this. They were actually one of our beta testers bought the name Interview Valet and gave it to me and said, this is what you need to call the company.
How cool is that?
It's like in the Navy, we used to have a line that said, you have to know right answer when told. And so I think there's a lot of things in business where listening to your clients, listening to the market will give you the answers.
You know, it is in my head. It's like I'm just trying to wrap my head around. You're literally in the Naval Academy. You're working on a nuclear sub. You are being told what to do and how to do it, extremely structured for those 5 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, boom, you come out. You got Mega Corp kind of telling you what to do. Do they cut you loose? Your sales rep kind of doing your thing. And then all of a sudden, you're like, I'm going to make all my own rules. I'll do whatever I want. And here you are, right? And that is a big pivot. I mean, that's hard to do.
Yes and no.
He's very structured in regards to like how he does.
Well, that's the training,
does
but
that
still,
right?
yeah.
Like, so I feel like he just uses that strength inside what you do day to day.
I think it's also the mindset, right, of coming at it from an engineer or seeing how other people have run it, right? And people say, well, do you run on traction or EOS? And I'm like, I've read all those books, but it's a little Navy nuclear power, a little John Brown Stryker, a little EOS. And one of the things that I always saw is even in nuclear power, you'd have to identify the problem very quickly and then take action, right? And there was standard operating procedures, things we would do, things we were trained on, but that's what I always loved, the drills that we would run. How fast can you identify that problem? How fast can you fix it? All the rest of this. And so to me, business has been similar to a game on that, right? Of the quick execution and then also learning for each one. And one of the things that I just pull my hair out at times where people will say, well, you don't understand my business. My business is so complicated, right? I could never train somebody to do that. And I'm like, you don't understand. Right now, there are submarines, aircraft carriers going around the world. The average age of someone running a nuclear power plant today is 22. They've got high school education, very smart, very motivated. But if you had to get, MIT PhDs to run nuclear power plants, you wouldn't be able to do it. They were able to figure out the systems, do it because they understood the business. I'm like, you can't teach somebody how to do it because you don't understand it yourself. And I think that's something that I've always taken that, how can I systematize this? How can I understand it? How can I learn from every mistake that we make so we don't make it again? And then have other people that can not only do it, but do it better than me.
Does every time you get on a boat in one of the 3 lakes that surround you, are they always calling you captain and you always got to drive?
No, I'm actually, great question. I'm scared to death sometimes when I'm on Lake Michigan because the storms kick up so quickly. I sail out there and, you can have a 20-foot wave on an aircraft carrier and you don't feel it. You can have a 4-foot wave on a sailboat and you're like, oh, we need to get going back to shore.
That's awesome. So share with, the client that you have, like, how did you determine that they need your service? Like, how did you come up with that idea for your business? Like, how did you come up with that to say there's something missing? I can bridge that gap.
Yeah, I think everything always starts with the problem, right?
Mhm.
What problem are you trying to solve? And what I was seeing is that you had people that had great ideas, great services, great products, and they couldn't break through the noise, right? Obscurity was the biggest problem. So how do you get heard by people? And so many times it's like, well, I'll just buy lots of Facebook ads or uh, Google ads, something like that. And it's like, well, that might help you break through the obscurity, but you're not really getting heard. And I later in life went back and got my MBA from Western Michigan University, go Broncos. And I took a lot of marketing classes, and still my grandfather could have told me what marketing was. It's like starting that conversation with somebody that could be an ideal client. So I really looked at it and said, how can you start that conversation with an ideal client? And tapping into other people's existing audiences has always worked, right? From TV to radio to blogs. So I really looked at it as you could use podcast interviews for that. And then the other idea too of people that have something to say, right? Our mission is to personally introduce inspiring thought leaders to millions of people they could serve for the betterment of all. So it's got to be someone that has something to say, a viewpoint, a point of view. We do a lot with category design, right? Because if all you want to say is, I'm cheaper, I'm faster, or, I'm the same, you don't need a conversation for that, right? That's just a race to the bottom. So it was really more of an idea of what has worked in the past. That's first principles, and how could we apply technology to it? And that was 10 years ago. And today, AI is indexing all podcast interviews. So it's today we're not only talking to our ideal clients, we're talking to the AI that refers them too.
Well, walk me through this. Somebody is, again, I want to make sure I understand what you do. So I've got a whatever ABC company and I sell whatevers. And I'm trying to get the word out to get more customers, whether it's locally, regionally, globally. What do you do for them? What is your process to go through to grab somebody? What does your
Yeah.
business do to make that work?
Great question. So it's the idea of who do you want to talk with, right? Who is your ideal customer? Who's your super consumer that will not only buy all the things that you produce, but promote it to other people too. So we identify who
I'm
that super
curious
consumer.
if your clients know that answer, or do you have to walk them through an exercise to get them there?
Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they use the marketing to figure that out, right? Based on the feedback they get from that. And here's an example. We worked with a CPA. He's got um, more personality than any accountant you'd ever want to meet. And I said, well,
More than
who do
this
you want
guy?
to talk to? And he's a retired New York City detective. And he said, all my clients are on Long Island brick and mortar. So he says, I just want 50 business owners in 50 states in 50 different industries. I want to diversify. Okay, so that's where we start. And then as we got the information and the feedback from his interviews, he was on a podcast with dentists, and he got lots of traffic from that. And we talked to him and he's like, oh yeah, I've already got a client from that. A couple more are we have discovery calls. He's like, I love dentists. They're recession proof. They're good cash flow. And so for the next 8 months, all we did was dental podcast. 80% of his business now is dentists. So we really tried to take a strategic approach of it's not just the podcast interview. It's not just the tactic. It's what are you trying to accomplish with that? And then we talk to them and say, are your audience listening to podcasts? So you had mentioned if you've got a local business, it's going to be a very inefficient way of doing it. If you talk to everybody in the United States and only people within 10 miles can drive to your business, it's not an efficient marketing strategy. So it probably wouldn't work for you. But if you've got a regional or national audience, that works a whole lot better. Professional services works really well. We work a lot well with franchisors that want to talk with their clients, but also potential partners that could work with them. And then we use data to find where their audience is. We work with them on different topics to talk about so that each podcast can be influential and stand by itself, right? So as the AI is indexing it, that it gets different content every time. And then really tying it together to make it a marketing channel, right? If it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense. So we're always looking to get a great return for our clients. And our best clients, value their time, they value their money, and they realize that everything doesn't come through a funnel anymore, right? It starts with conversations, and that's what we do for them.
Isn't it crazy how you market shifted from the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 90s? Like every decade, it's a whole different way you have to go to find your customers. And at the end of the day, it still comes down to relationships, no matter what. It's just, how do you get the contact to get in front of them to do that relationship is I guess the tactics or the method, I guess, right?
Yeah, I think, the strategy never changes, but the tactics always expire.
Right.
When they invented guns, bows and arrows became obsolete. When they invented different things, jet aircraft, the biplane became obsolete. And I think it's the same thing now with AI and everything. Older forms are becoming elite, right? Um, uh, and it's like sometimes when people talk about, old marketing tactics, I'm thinking it sounds to me like the yellow pages. It used to work, but it doesn't anymore. So how can you take first principles and say, what are we trying to do? And how can we use the new tactics, the new technology to leverage it?
And it seems like you're the first to do it this way, one of the first companies to do it, right? Have you seen how you've had to adjust yourself over the last, 12 years you've been doing this, 13 years? How long? Yeah. Have you had to change your tactics of how you get customers and do what you do just with the AI component that came on board?
Yes, and we've been doing it for a decade now.
Mhm.
And when we started, we were, there was less than 5 people or 5 companies that ever thought about doing this. And we really became the category leader of podcast interview marketing, not just guesting, which to me is an activity, but actually driving results with it. And it's continued to evolve, right? I wrote a book that's going on a decade now ago that talked about, how to grow your business with targeted podcast interviews. And people would say, well, why would you tell somebody how you do it? And it's like, well, they can always copy what we did. They can't copy what we're testing now and what we're going to do. And, we saw a huge uptick in the business when podcasting started to take off about 2018. And then after COVID, when companies thought, well, we can't do in-person events anymore, right? So how are we going to reach our clients? And then last year, the fall of 2024, when it became clear that AI is indexing podcast interviews, right? And one of the best ways to get referred by AI is to get the message out there on podcast interviews. So it's always been an evolution and always learning of what is the next thing there.
Do you think, go ahead.
Well, I'm going to pivot hard. So
Well,
if
before you pivot,
go ahead.
so do you think in your industry that AI is helping you and makes your business better, or is it something that's helping you, but it's going to make you less relevant because AI takes over? Because everybody's worried about AI. Like, what is it going to take my job away? It sounds like this is something that's augmenting you to help you better, right? To do better.
Mhm.
Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
Which is crazy because everyone would think, well, no, this is going to take you out of business because it's going to be AI, but it's not about
I,
that.
I look at AI as a tool, and a tool is an amplifier of your brilliance or your stupidity. And this struck me years ago. A friend of mine, Dan Miller, had an artist take a chainsaw and carve a beautiful eagle in it, right? I took a similar chainsaw and that winter almost cut my leg off, right? It was the same tool, but It just amplified the brilliance or stupidity of the user. And we're seeing the same thing now, right? And AI is allowing people to spam at scale, right? There's a podcaster, Joe Saul Seahigh, from Stacking Benjamins. He just did a post on this, and he called us out favorably on this. But he showed a screen capture of the emails that came to him. And some of them said, "Dear Stacking, dear Benjamins, dear Joe Saul Seahigh, Cumulus Media." And he's like, these are nothing but spam. And there's companies out there that will tell you, you can pitch 1,000 hosts in the time that would take you to pitch one. And it's like, it's very efficient, but it's not effective. And so we use it to help us, right? Not to replace us. And it's been great. We've been able to give our team more tools, more data, but not to replace them. And so it's that same thing. Somebody called it the barbell market. And I thought it was a great visual, right? That if you're racing to the bottom, there's a lot of people there. If you're trying to do the best in class, right, there's room there. But this idea of in the middle where people are just trying to do crap at scale, there's no room there. The market is just denying that.
Before you say your thing, I think the epiphany that just hit me here is all you hear about AI is going to replace everybody. It's the wave of the future. You got to get on board. And it's just this terrifying thing. You just summed it up where it's a tool and you just got to know how to use it. And it's probably going to help you more than hurt you. And I think that's for our listeners. Don't fear it, embrace it, and figure out how do you put that in your toolbox. Was that a fair statement?
Very much so. And somebody encouraged me years ago. There was a book that came out like in Y2K, and it was something about the next industrial revolution or something. And it was interesting to read it. And he told me, reread the book, and every time it says computers or the internet, just change and put the word AI in there. And all of the fears that we had 20 years ago are the same we have today. It's going to replace us. It'll destroy us, all the rest of this, or it's going to empower us. It's the same thing. It's probably coming at a quicker speed, but it's just a tool, right? It's going to either amplify our brilliance or stupidity.
Awesome. Sorry, Julie. Go ahead.
So I'm going to hard pivot for some harder questions.
Uh-oh.
You talked about your grandpa, but is there anybody else as you went maybe and you were in the Naval Academy working at Stryker, maybe as you've gone through, this part of your journey, that was a mentor to you that kind of helped guide you, perhaps sometimes instead of the 2x4 that kept hitting you in the head that you talked about?
I've had so many mentors in my life, and I've learned so much from them. I can think of like one was the captain of the aircraft carrier, right? Captain now retired as an Admiral Bill Hayden. And I remember asking him, like, Skipper, how come you are so happy, right? You sleep less than anybody else on the ship. You've got more pressure on you than anybody else on the ship. And he just smiled and he said, someday I'm going to look back on this and this is going to be the best time of my life. And I thought of that. And there are times where it's like when COVID hit, right? Someday I'm going to look back on this and this is going to be the best time in my life, right? And I am more proud of what our team did over COVID than anything. We stepped up for our clients. We got new clients, right? So that lesson taught me there. John Brown, who was the CEO of Stryker, nobody knows John Brown, but he is the only CEO in U.S. history of a publicly traded company that has grown a company 20% for 20 consecutive years. It's never been done before. And I got a chance to meet him and work with him. And he would always say about the long term, right? It's not about what you do this quarter, but can you do it every quarter? And I see so many people that are fast up and fast down. And I always think about that, right? John Brown never had enough growth to hit the Inc. 5000, but he built Stryker from a small family business of like $100 million up into a multi-billion-dollar company, and became one of the richest men in Michigan doing it too. But just by growing 20% a year. And so those are things that I look at. And I do, I'm in a group called the Entrepreneurs Organization. It's a global organization. And I mentor people, and it's called EOA Accelerator, basically helping people get up to $1 million in sales. And I tell them straight out, you think I'm mentoring you, but you're mentoring me, because the questions you're asking are the ones that I should be asking too. And sometimes when I answer you with a really good answer, it's a reminder to myself of like, oh yeah, I need to do this. So I think we all have mentors, and we should surround ourselves with great people. And too often people think, well, a mentor has to be in front of you. No, some people are in front of you, some are peers, and some are behind you. And those positions can change depending on what the time is or what the question is, right? I don't understand the Gen Z audience, right? So I can have someone that I'm mentoring that understands them a whole lot better. So he mentors me on that.
Gotcha.
So I have one last
Yes,
question.
go
Do you
ahead.
have?
No,
I want to make
that's
sure
good.
I
No,
give
no,
you
you're
all
good.
the things.
No.
So what is your end game?
My end game is, years ago, a buddy of mine, dear friend, a fellow entrepreneur, we decided that we could never retire because our golf games are really bad and we would drive our wives crazy. So we were probably in our early 40s and decided that retirement was going to be doing fun things with interesting people and writing it all off as a business expense.
That's
Now,
some great advice.
Brian died way too early, and way too suddenly. And when he passed away shortly after that, I decided, you know what? I'm going to consider myself retired. So I just want to do fun things with interesting people and write it all off as a business expense. It doesn't mean there aren't challenging times there, but as I look at all of the things that I'm doing, I never want to stop doing them. I never want to retire from it. So the end game is just to keep adding value, keep creating leaders, keep having fun, and keep being relevant as long as I can.
He passed.
Spoken like a true entrepreneur. So I don't know if you were born with that or that was your environment, but every entrepreneur, there's no end game.
Impossible.
It's
to
a
stop.
trick question.
Or maybe we all just got dropped on our head at an early age, but this is who we are, and we're not going to change.
Like, we know too much. Why would we ever stop? And again, you certainly look like you're having fun with it. So why would you ever stop?
Exactly.
Well, that is awesome. Well, could you give a little plug to your company for our listeners if they want to reach out to you?
Oh, very much so. If you want to get in touch with me, just go to interviewvalet.com/empower. Right. And I'll have all my social media there. There's an assessment, how can podcast interview marketing work for you? Free copy of my book there. And if you want to talk with me, I'll put all of my social media there. My calendar scheduling link will all be back there at interviewvalet.com/empower.
Well, Tom, it's been a great, you've been a great guest. We've learned a lot today. Appreciate you coming in. Thanks for your 5 years of service. Appreciate that. That's huge. And looking forward to our paths crossing here in the near future. Another great episode of the Empowering Entrepreneurs Podcast. I'm Glenn Harper.
Julie Smith.
Tom, that was awesome.
Thank you.